Part 1 of this film, although dealing primarily with the 1960-61 tropical trials in Australia, uses the experiences and lessons of previous trials to illustrate the conditions under which the heavy recovery tractor and the Saladin armoured car were tested for the United Kingdom. Britain's Centurion tank was the subject of the first series of tropical trials carried out by Australia. The trials took place on Los Negros, one of the Admiralty group of islands near the equator. Climatic conditions meet tropical trials requirements, but similar conditions already exist in North Queensland with more economy, greater security and better communications. It was therefore decided to use these home facilities for future trials. The area chosen for the trials was the narrow coastal strip between Cairns and Cardwell, flanked on the west by the Great Dividing Range and on the east by the tropical waters of the Great Barrier Reef. This is the region of highest rainfall and highest humidity in Australia. Such a climate produces typical tropical vegetation and heavy jungle growth, which is a prerequisite for the tropical trials, particularly static storage trials in which vehicles are left for long periods in the jungle. Jungle vines, strong enough to carry a full-grown man, are part of this growth and are a nuisance in jungle running. They wrap themselves around protruding parts and either rip them off or badly damage them. All reports have emphasized that protruding parts and fittings should be kept to a minimum. There are many hazards in the Queensland swamps and rainforests. They range from crocodiles to the unpleasant fever carried by the microscopic sandfly. The gympie bush or stinging tree should be avoided. It delivers a painfully persistent sting which can last for many months and may recur when the affected part comes in contact with water. Trials personnel should learn all they can about Queensland snakes, for there are many poisonous varieties. This one was harmless enough, but it could have been a taipan, one of the world's most deadly reptiles. This wading trial demonstrates the uncompromising nature of the flash floods which occur with surprising speed in the wet season, which lasts from November to April. They cause serious dislocation of traffic on road, rail and some airstrips. Mud is a must for tropical trials, and there is certainly no shortage of mud in the Queensland rainforest belt when the rains come. In the shadow of Mount Bartle Frere, Queensland's highest mountain, is the treacherous Ubanangi swamp, where very deep mud under the surface water presents a searching test for all types of vehicles, whether wheeled or tracked. Corrugations are an unpleasant feature of the North Queensland gravel roads. The best way to treat these bone shakers is to get over them quickly, for besides causing extreme discomfort, they are very unkind to motor vehicles. The third series of trials took place in 1960 when two pilot models of a four-stretcher ambulance on a long wheelbase Land Rover chassis were tested in the Innisfail area of North Queensland and in the hot, dry areas of Western Queensland and Central Australia. The second ambulance is seen in the choking red dust near the opal mines of Copropedi. The dust gets into one's hair, ears, eyes, mouth and clothing, and is an even worse menace than the small, sticky flies which are always with one in the desert. Here is the same ambulance passing Lake Hart, one of Australia's salt lakes on the Woomera rocket range. Here is encountered Kopi dust, a limestone dust as fine as talcum powder. Further ambulance trials were arranged for late in 1960 to coincide with those of two vehicles from the United Kingdom. The UK vehicles, the Saladin armoured car and the heavy recovery tractor, arrived in Port Melbourne aboard SS Ballarat in September 1960. The current series of trials began with the receipt of these two vehicles by the Army Design Establishment. The original detachment consisted of 6 officers and 18 other ranks. Later, their number was expanded by the attachment of civilian engineers and a photographer and 6 more military ranks to cover Australian projects included in the trials. The detachment was a composite one and contained representatives of 6 corps. They were chosen for their intelligence, adaptability, sociability, and of course, a high standard of technical efficiency. They were to be together for 7 months. The trials convoy of 11 vehicles left the Trials and Proving Wing on 2nd November 1960 for North Queensland, destination Innisfail, nearly 2,000 miles by road from Melbourne. This journey was to provide a searching test, not only for the 2 UK vehicles, but also for the support vehicles, some of which were in the experimental stage. The HF and VHF wireless sets carried greatly facilitated convoy control. Later, they were to prove invaluable in the general conduct of the trials. Innisfail was reached after 15 days of actual running. This prosperous town was chosen as the base for the 1960-61 trials. It is situated at the confluence of the North and South Johnston Rivers, latitude 17 degrees 34 south, longitude 146 degrees 01 east. A complete meteorological station was set up at the Tropical Trials Centre in Innisfail to provide a continuous climatic record for the whole testing period and a check on daily measurements made on vehicles during trials. Readings were entered on a series of log sheets drawn up before the detachment left Melbourne. Pre-trial study of the area to be used for the trials had made the map a familiar object to trials officers who were eager to become better acquainted with the actual terrain and its problems. It was obvious from study of previous trials reports that the 1960-61 trials would follow a similar pattern. The trials area includes unimproved private land used with the cooperation of the owners who gave every assistance to the detachment. All the trial circuits are within the 40-mile radius of Innisfail. Soon after arrival at Innisfail, a detailed reconnaissance of the trials areas was made to confirm the planning based on previous trials. These officers are discussing one of the sites proposed for firing trials of the Saladin main and secondary armament. This firing range is located southwest of Tully, a flat plains area covered with grass and backed by hills. It would prove an ideal site for firing trials. A light aircraft was available, and this was used for area survey, air-to-ground recce, photography, and selection of jungle circuits and sites. Queensland has 3,000 miles of coastline, and there are many beaches available in the Innisfail area for the type of sand trials specified. They can be broadly divided into 2 types, those with coarse sand and those with fine sand. The coarse sand is usually the more difficult to negotiate as it packs more loosely. OC detachment would have welcomed an engineer component for the development and maintenance of jungle circuits. Repair of this bridge was a job for experts, but none was available, and the repair effected was but temporary, to say the least. The 2 UK vehicles were put in their static storage positions early in January and were left there for 14 days. They were then carefully inspected and any deterioration noted. Shelter was provided for the picket posted to guard the vehicles and record temperature and humidity readings. The second static storage period lasted for 28 days. 15 inches of rain fell during this period. Inspection revealed more deterioration than after the first storage trial. Results indicated that special service and precautions are necessary for prolonged storage periods in the tropics. Trials took place after each static storage trial in order to determine the effect of tropical storage on functioning. Here is the Saladin undergoing firing trials on Bramston Beach. This 9-ton press was lifted by the tractor with no apparent difficulty. It was concluded that no major harm had come to either vehicle after its sojourn in the jungle. A Royal Australian Air Force Hercules arrived at Townsville with an interesting newcomer to the trials. This was a full-track cargo truck named Muskeg, from the Bombardier Company of Canada, which caused much interest among the troops at Townsville. The truck was taken by road to Innisfail, given a coat of paint to change it to the deep bronze green of the service, and then tried out in swamp country, a different proposition from the snowdrifts for which it was intended. Another addition to the vehicles undergoing trials was one of the ambulances seen before, now elevated to prototype rank by virtue of modifications found necessary after its extensive tropical trials early in 1960. This prototype has since undergone successful user trials and will shortly be introduced into the service. The detachment was honoured by a visit from His Excellency Sir Henry Abel Smith, Governor of Queensland, on the occasion of a citizen military forces camp at Townsville. The trials vehicles were paraded before the troops, who showed a lively interest in them. Highlight of the demonstration came when the heavy recovery tractor lifted the 12-ton Saladin. On being invited to take a ride in the Saladin, the governor insisted on exchanging his slouch hat for a black beret, and then, with obvious enthusiasm, took over the gunner's position. Later on, he actually drove the Saladin himself. The hot-wet phase of the trials closed on April 28, 1961, when the convoy left Innisfail for Townsville and then points west. From Townsville on, it was goodbye to the bitumen and back to gravel or earth roads. The bitumen appeared again at Mount Isa and continued on as the Barclay Highway to Camooweal and the Stewart Highway, a fine bitumen road which was built during the Second World War and stretches for nearly 1,000 miles from Darwin to Alice Springs. While in the Alice Springs area, dust samples were taken, as in other dust areas en route. The sampling apparatus was rigged to a trailer drawn by the ambulance, which was then driven along a road made, it seemed, of dust alone. The dust was then bagged and stored away for future analysis in Melbourne in connection with a current project on the effect of dust on engine wear. The gravel road reappeared just outside Alice Springs. It gave reasonably good going for about 200 miles, but an uncomfortable ride was experienced when the gravel road ended and its place was taken by a faintly defined road covered by large stones, or gibbers as they were known in Australia. Conditions improved as the convoy neared the South Australian coast, and at Port Augusta normal highway running was resumed. The rest of the route to Melbourne was plain sailing after the tortuous journey of the past few weeks. The lush Victorian countryside was a marked contrast to the harsh plains of the centre. The convoy reached the Trials and Proving Wing on May 31st, 1961. So ended the fourth series of tropical trials carried out by Australia. A total of 10,000 miles was covered, half in the hot, wet areas of Queensland and the remainder on the overland journeys, which included the arid, inhospitable desert country of outback Australia. The trials took 7 months to complete and finished within the planned period. The OC Trials Detachment was able to report to the Master General of Ordnance his mission accomplished with no casualties to men or vehicles.